Well, I didn't see them anywhere particularly in General Motors. I didn't see them with Rona, didn't see with Davie Shipyard, and I haven't seen them do anything with respect to those pensioners and Sears who have been ripped off.
Tonight, the opposition is not buying the reason behind the SNC-Lavalin scandal being just about jobs.
Shame on him, because his actions speak louder than words, and he's proven to us that those words are empty.
20 women BC chiefs show their support for Jody Wilson-Raybould.
It's sort of misleading. It builds upon a lot of good words, but there's actually no real teeth to it.
And First Nations say the new child welfare legislation does not live up to what they thought they were agreeing to. Good evening, welcome to APTN National News. I'm Dennis Ward. The SNC-Lavalin scandal's fever pitch will likely cool down a bit as Parliament has adjourned for the next 2 weeks. But as APTN's Todd Lamoran reports, the last 24 hours had its share of moments, especially from last night's emergency debate on the matter. He begins with this morning's cabinet shuffle.
I, Lawrence Macaulay, do solemnly and sincerely...
Today's oath-taking was made necessary by Jody Wilson-Raybould's resignation as Veterans Affairs Minister. Lawrence Macaulay takes over that position, while Marianne Monsef becomes International Development Minister, and Marie-Claude Bibeau is now Agriculture Minister. All three were asked whether Wilson-Raybould should remain a Liberal Member of Parliament. They all gave similar answers.
Well, and these decisions are made by the Prime Minister, and whatever decision that's made, I can live with any decision that is made, but I know Jody, a well-respected lady.
Last night, the House held an emergency debate on the SNC-Lavalin scandal. The Conservatives repeatedly asked for Prime Minister Trudeau to step down.
I have truly lost confidence in this Prime Minister and in this government. I have been shaken to my core about what I heard yesterday at the Justice Committee. It is almost too much to digest in a 24-hour period, but I know one thing. This Prime Minister should resign.
The NDP didn't go as far as demanding a resignation, but want a judicial inquiry.
Do we live in a democracy, which I've been proud of all my life to be part of, where the rule of law means something, where we don't have politicians telling our law enforcement community what to do? Or do we live in a system like in some other fledgling democracies in other parts of the world where politicians call the shots?
One of the responses from Liberals was there was nothing wrong with trying to protect the jobs of employees at SNC-Lavalin.
Will he stand now and have the courage to say the truth, that he will support that what this government is doing the right thing to protect the job of Canadians?
Well, I didn't see them anywhere particularly in General Motors. I didn't see them with Rona, didn't see with Davie Shipyard, and I haven't seen them do anything with respect to those pensioners and Sears who have been ripped off. And so, frankly, I don't want to hear any lessons about that.
Conservatives also pushed for the RCMP to get involved. Liberals responded that Wilson-Raybould on Wednesday did not mention the political pressure as being criminal.
But her testimony was very clear, and I'll cite it exactly. In my opinion, it's not illegal. She does say it's very inappropriate.
Green Party leader Elizabeth May sided with the Conservatives.
So I don't allege criminality in this matter, but I think it remains a possibility, and I'd like to see the RCMP take over an investigation. I disagree with my friend.
Things will heat up again next Wednesday. That's when Prime Minister Trudeau's recently resigned senior political advisor, Gerald Butts, and the clerk of the Privy Council, Michael Wernick, will appear before the Justice Committee. Todd Lamoran, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Since Jody Wilson-Raybould's testimony earlier this week in Ottawa, there's been an outpouring of support for the former Attorney General from across the country, including Vancouver, where chiefs and political leaders came together to share their thoughts on the events that shook the nation's capital. APTN's Tina House has that story.
This video was posted onto Twitter, showing chiefs from across BC shouting their support for Jody Wilson-Raybould. And close to 20 of those women chiefs left the meeting to show their united support, to share their thoughts on the explosive testimony from former Attorney General of Canada, Jody Wilson-Raybould. What do you think of Jody Wilson-Raybould schooling the federal government on the rule of law in Canada?
I think our ancestors are smiling with us. I really believe that she showed the country the true strength of Aboriginal people, especially Aboriginal women.
For Cheryl Casimir, she says what struck her was that Jody was alone while testifying.
The message that I received after all of that was that she definitely had to have undergone such stress for that long period of time, to be silently holding that information to herself and to her closest colleagues, and not being able to say anything about it, and trying to determine what was going to be her next step.
And as we know, that next step was testifying in front of the entire country.
She wasn't there just to be accountable within her position with the Canadian government, but to all of those things that all of us as Indigenous people have to remember when we step into positions of leadership.
Everyone in this room has worked with Wilson-Raybould in some capacity over the years. And Chief Maureen Chapman had some words for the Prime Minister.
Trudeau stood up when he got elected and said he was behind women, he was a feminist, and this and that and the other. Shame on him, because his actions speak louder than words, and he's proven to us that those words are empty.
Chief Vivian Tom of the Wet'suwet'en First Nation traveled from her community to attend the All Chiefs meeting.
Before I left home, I was telling my son when we were watching it on TV before that, I said, that's the woman that is taking on the Prime Minister of Canada, and she's First Nations.
She held strong to who she is as an Indigenous woman, as an Indigenous leader, and not just for our Indigenous people, but for all of Canada.
Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
And it's not just women chiefs. Quite a few other Indigenous leaders are rallying around Jody Wilson-Raybould as well, including Chief Bob Chamberlain, who says that the Trudeau government must be shaken over the allegations of interference regarding SNC-Lavalin. He also says the latest testimony will spell trouble for the Liberals.
Well, after the testimony, I believe that now the credibility, the honesty and integrity of the Prime Minister are now fully under question. With the evolving story of what happened from him and his staff to the truth that was spoken yesterday. And I believe now that he's now captaining a ship that is clearly divided, and this is not going to bode well for the Liberal government going into the election in the fall.
The artist whose editorial page cartoon has been widely condemned online today is apologizing. The cartoon by Yannick Lemay depicts former Justice Minister Jody Wilson-Raybould in a buckskin dress, feather in her hair, holding a tomahawk, delivering a knockout punch to a battered Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. It appeared in French-language newspapers today. In an email to APTN News, Lemay wrote, Miss Wilson-Raybould is a great representative of the Aboriginal community who proudly defends herself, so I wanted to build her up. I wanted this drawing simple and without malice. I realized today that I use bad visual codes to elevate her Aboriginal ancestry. I draw a great lesson. I want to apologize to anyone that I have offended. Well, two new bills are receiving criticism in Ottawa. One promises to keep Indigenous children and families together. Another is meant to promote Indigenous languages in Canada. An NDP member of Parliament says both Bill C-91 and C-92 fail to include clear funding outlines.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberals have presented bills on Indigenous languages and Indigenous child welfare, but have not committed any base funding. Children and languages are too important for their promises to be empty. Language keepers and child welfare advocates both say these bills don't meet the needs of Indigenous people. First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people will not accept promises that come without funding. Why are the Liberals making empty promises to Indigenous people?
Language is at the core of who we are, but Indigenous languages across the country are endangered and are disappearing. This is a direct consequence of our government's past actions meant to destroy Indigenous languages. It is time to take action, and that's why our government introduced Bill C-91 with support from all parties, and we hope that this will become legislation before the end of June.
Well, we have more reaction to the Indigenous Child Welfare Bill. That's coming up after the break. Here's a look at Saturday's weather forecast starting on the East Coast. 0 and sunny for Halifax, -2 in Charlottetown, -12 for Nain, snow and -9 for Happy Valley Goose Bay and Cartwright. 5 below with snow for Montreal, -4 in Quebec City. In Toronto, high of 0, same as London and Sarnia. In Northern Ontario, -9 with snow for Thunder Bay, -13 in Sioux Lookout with snow. In Northern Manitoba, -21 in Puckatawagan, 19 below for the Paw. In Winnipeg, 17 below, 18 below under sunny skies in Brandon, 19 below in snow in Dauphin. -21 in North Battleford, Saskatoon, Regina, Estevan, and Swift Current. -18 in Uranium City. Welcome back. Some First Nations organizations are expressing skepticism after the federal government finally introduced its Indigenous child legislation on Thursday. The bill is being touted as a way to hand over jurisdiction to Indigenous peoples, but some are saying that's not actually the case. Brittany Hobson has that story.
After more than a year since the emergency meetings on child welfare, Ottawa is moving ahead with its new legislation, much to the disappointment of some First Nation leaders.
It's sort of misleading. It builds upon a lot of good words, but there's actually no real teeth to it.
On Thursday, Indigenous Services Minister Seamus O'Regan said the bill will keep Indigenous children with their families.
Finally affirms what Indigenous communities across this country have been asking governments to recognize for decades, that Indigenous communities have inherent jurisdiction over child and family services, and that they should be the ones deciding what is best for their children and for their families.
Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs Grand Chief Arlen Dumas says the bill goes against his group's previous work with the federal government. In December 2017, AMC signed a memorandum of understanding with then Minister of Indigenous Services Jane Philpott.
There was a commitment made to acknowledging the jurisdiction that we have over our children, and that's actually not in the legislation, and it's not specific enough in the way that it needs to be.
In a statement, Anishinaabe Aski Nation Grand Chief Alvin Fiddler echoed Dumas's concerns. This legislation does recognize the need for children in care to maintain strong connections to their communities, but ultimately it continues to enforce a status quo system that can override First Nation jurisdiction. In Saskatchewan, the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations welcomed the legislation, but reiterated the need for complete jurisdiction. The provincial child welfare system has not met its obligation to protect and nurture the children in care. The ability to build our own system with our own governance is needed. The bill has yet to become law. Assembly of First Nations National Chief Perry Bellegarde says time is of the essence with an election pending.
This is an introduction for first reading. It has a very precarious journey to go in 4 months to achieve that royal assent, and we really need to work together collaboratively, cooperatively, to make sure that this gets done.
Brittany Hobson, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
A memorial on a Manitoba First Nation for families of the communities missing and murdered. The memorial was 4 years in the making, but community members say this has been a healing process for them. With more, here's Ashley Branson.
Around 200 people were at Sagings Band Hall to remember the communities missing and murdered. Chief Derek Henderson says plans were for a Memorial Day and the unveiling of a monument. There were problems finishing the monument, but the affected families decided to go ahead with the day as part of their healing.
I think they've been able to share their stories now about their loved ones that have gone, right? And you know, they can say things openly now.
Lillian Cook coordinated the meeting and sat with the families through the process.
And this is what they wanted. They didn't want to be alone. They wanted to share their story. They wanted to share the memory of their loved one.
The band says there are at least 17 missing or murdered women and girls. One of the most famous is Tina Fontaine, whose unsolved case led to the national inquiry. Cook says after doing her own research, the number is higher. Earl Morisseau lost his sister Glenda in 1991 and his niece Kelly in 2006.
I think maybe I can put the rest in my mind. Hopefully they can feel better as well, you know, and get some rest, because, you know, a lot of the ways they went were really tragic.
Isabel Fontaine says she's here for her sister Sharon, who was last seen in 2000.
She is hilarious, always laughing. Just bring out the whole room of laughter. And that's the way I think of her all the time, like, you know, the positive stuff that she used to say.
The monument is called Kakige Pamichiyang, meaning life flows forever. When it's done, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, it will sit in the community's arbor. Ashley Branson, APTN National News, Saging First Nation.
A First Nation south of Edmonton is building tiny homes for the less fortunate. More on that story coming up. Here's the rest of Saturday's weather forecast, picking back up in northern Alberta. Sunny skies and 22 below for Grand Prairie and Peace River. Minus 19 in Edmonton, Calgary, and Medicine Hat. On the west coast, much warmer, plus 7 for Tofino in Victoria, plus 6 in Campbell River and Vancouver. 14 below under sunny skies for Fort Nelson, minus 12 in Dease Lake. In the Yukon, minus 19 in Old Crow, 11 below and sunny for Whitehorse. In the NWT, minus 11 for Fort Liard, Trout Lake, and Norman Wells. Minus 16 in Wrigley. 14 below for Sax Harbor and Tuck. Minus 16 in Paulatuck. Minus 20 for Repulse Bay. 19 below in Baker Lake. Minus 17 for Clyde River. Minus 18 in Resolute. Welcome back. Montana First Nation south of Edmonton is building tiny homes for some of the less fortunate people in the community. APTN's Chris Stewart visited one of the tiny homes under construction.
These young members of the Montana First Nation are helping to build 2 tiny homes in their community. This tiny house is designed for a single person. These prospective trade students are helping their fellow band members and also developing useful skills that offer a good wage. They hope to attend NATE in the fall. With the work they've done here, they may be able to skip their first year at the school. Vicki Weechie is the Executive Director of the Agamic Community Development Society.
They're able to challenge their exam while building tiny homes and getting hands-on experience in the construction, the electrical, the plumbing, and starting from the ground up, building the home for a community.
I learned how to do the foundation, I learned how to do the framing now, the roofing, I already know the roofing, and I know how to do drywalling and installation.
It's really helping me out a lot, and it's helping me giving me the skills I need to be a carpenter.
Agamic has partnered with the Alberta government, the Tradewinds to Success Training Society, the Green Arrow Corp, and the Montana First Nation to fund the 2 homes. Chevy Rabbit is a facilitator at Agamic. She says tiny homes like these can help the housing crisis in Indigenous communities across Canada and help the youth gain in-demand skills.
Altogether there was 16 participants, and now we have about 10. Individuals who are building the 2 tiny homes that will go to a vulnerable sector of Montana First Nation, people who need housing.
To the wall, yeah, right there, right to the outside.
Watching these students build this house is quite neat because it's like a studio apartment in Edmonton. Has a little studio here, a kitchen, a bedroom, washroom, and a washer and dryer stacked on top of each other, and it's perfect for a single home.
It's pretty satisfying once you see it all start to come together. When things are coming together, kind of proud of it.
This home will be finished next month, and one person will have a new home to call their own. Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Montana First Nation.
Decades might have passed, but the effects and memories of residential school live on. Our reporter Charlotte Jacobs sat down with one family in the Northwest Territories who are trying to retrace their history, both good and bad.
That's myself back here standing up. I don't know what age I was, and that's my oldest brother Lawrence here.
It's memories like this one the Beaulieu brothers remember fondly. They are piecing together their history after being torn apart.
Do you remember the day those photos were taken?
No.
No?
But over 50 years ago anyway. Probably 1967.
The Beaulieus are Saskatchewan Copper people from the east arm of Great Slave Lake. A strong family with their own traditions and language.
When we got taken away, we're receiving home in captivity for 6 months because our language. I spoke my language, and when you have broken English together, you get punished for that.
Today, they might not remember exact dates, but time cannot erase the impact of residential school. It's a hauntingly familiar story.
Taken away, they said we're going for a plane ride.
The three boys were taken to Brennan Hall in Fort Smith. Robert Beaulieu was only 8 years old.
When it comes to like Christmas or Easter, everybody else gets to go home. Us were chucked right back in the receiving home. That went on until finally one day we got a Christmas break.
The brothers would lose contact with their two sisters.
We don't know exactly what happened to them because they separated us once we got in there. Like they made a new receiving home. They put the girls over there, and they kept three of us in together.
Lawrence Beaulieu spent 10 years in residential school. He says although he's taken many steps towards healing, many wounds will remain open.
My dad went there. He wanted to say goodbye to his babies. And my dad, his parka was just full of ice from tears. I'll never forget that day.
As he has decided to preserve his residential school records so that the next generation can know what happened to his family. But he still has to fill in the blanks.
I still think of my family, but there's no contact numbers. It must have been during carnival days here.
Now the brothers are hoping to plan a family reunion. And it starts with looking at photos of memories like this one. Charlotte Jacobs, APTN National News, Yellowknife.
Well, that is your APTN National News for this Friday, and what a week it's been. To catch up, you can tune in to APTN National News Weekend tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern, or visit our website anytime, aptnnews.ca. I'm Dennis Ward. Have a great weekend.